But here's what I want to get to, because I think it's at the core of your message. So if we're on thoughtful, and if we're on just being the best person we're capable of being, I love your 6 points that you hold yourself to. Okay. So this is at the essence, I think, of where we're at here in this conversation. There are a lot of ways that we can impact others, good and bad, but so much is out of our control, except for your 6. What do you call them? You refer to these 6 things that you hold yourself to. Okay.
Yeah, we call it the leadership test, or I call it the leadership test. I didn't call that in the book because here's the thing. People hate tests so much that my editor suggested I don't use the term. And words are so powerful, right? And the word test has a really negative connotation because for all of you listening out there, every test you wrote for the first 20 years of your life was somebody else's test. It was somebody else's questions. They demanded the answers that would make them happy, and you delivered those answers, and then you got evaluated. And they gave you something that impacted your future, right? Like usually a grade that impacted your opportunities in your future. But it was always somebody else's test. And that's really stressful. It's wildly disempowering. Makes nobody like that damn word, which is problematic for me because one thing I've learned since I left school, because tests were the number one source of my personal validation. That is where my identity came from, is how well I wrote other people's tests. But now I realize the only tests that define who you are as a leader and as a person are the tests you choose to give yourself. And so we have a tool called the leadership test. It's a test I choose to give myself. Everyone in my company is responsible for it as well. And the idea of the leadership test, and the reason it's a test is this, just as a quick little scientific background. Tests are composed of questions. What the research shows is that questions are a really powerful driver of human behavior. The human brain does not like unanswered questions, hates them. All of human exploration, folklore, faith, it all comes out of one reality. The human brain hates unanswered questions, hates them. The human brain would rather make up a lie. It would rather believe a lie it itself made up than deal with the fact that it does not know the answer to a question. This is why when you're trying to remember the name of an actor or an actress and you can't, and you think you just move on, why 24 to 48 hours later, the name of the actor, the actress, the song, or the movie pops into your head? Because your conscious brain was allowed to continue on and give up on that question, your subconscious brain was having none of it. It was like, all right, you go work on other stuff, but I'm going to stay on this. And eventually it finds the answer a day later and just fires it into your conscious, in a massive non sequitur. It's just oh, by the way, it was Drew Barrymore. Boom, it just throws it in there. And so the fact that if your brain has an unanswered question, it will actually adapt its behavior without your knowledge to find the answer to the question. And so what we did is we identified 6 core values, and they are impact, growth, courage, empowerment, class, and self-respect. And we created a question to go along with each and every one of those values. And the key was that you can't answer the question without living the value. So for impact, what did I do today to recognize someone else's leadership? All right, that's what we went out every day trying to do. That's how we started it all. Because it's on such a pedestal that if I told you you're a leader, the way you behave, the way you treated others, it's inspired me, right? It makes me want to be better. And that is true. But you can't say that to someone and not have them walk away feeling better off. And because we said impact, our definition of that as a value, and you got to define your values, is a commitment to creating moments that cause people to feel like they're better off for having interacted with you. All right, that's the definition. Well, it's impossible to answer the question, how did I recognize someone else's leadership, without creating one of those moments, right? It's on a pedestal. If I told you you're a leader in any way, shape, or form, you're going to walk away feeling better off. So I've created a question that cannot be answered without living a value that's important to my identity. The key thing is, because I made it into a question, what I've actually done is created a situation in my brain where it desperately needs an answer to that question, and it will change my behavior to go find one. So now when I see the woman at Tim Hortons, sorry for you folks at Dunkin' Donuts, when I see the woman at Dunkin' Donuts go above and beyond when nobody is being kind to her, when everyone just wants their coffee and couldn't give less of a crap a human being is putting up with all of this, when I take a moment or I see her behaving in a way that is above and beyond, instead of being like, oh, that's nice, but you know what? I just want my coffee. I don't really have time to get into a conversation. My brain goes, oh, here's your chance to recognize someone else's leadership. And by the way, I feel really uncomfortable because I haven't done that yet. So if you don't mind doing that right now, I'd appreciate it. And when your brain says, I'd appreciate you doing this, you're going to do it. And sure enough, we tried that one question. And all of a sudden, we were creating more moments of impact because we had the question. And so what we did is we added a new question every month for an entire school year. And by the end of the year, we've developed this leadership test. 6 questions tied to those 6 values. And so here are the questions quickly. So instead of every day hoping that I lived impact and growth and courage, empowerment, class, and self-respect, every day I got up saying, I have these questions. And my brain expects to have an answer for these by the end of the day. Impact, what have I done today to recognize someone else's leadership? Growth, what did I do today to make it more likely someone would learn something? And that could be me. Courage, what did I do today that might not work, but I tried it anyway? Empowerment, what did I do today to move someone else closer to a goal? Which is really important. This was developed in the school world where kids are taught from a young age, you're competing with one another. Don't get someone else an A. That's idiotic. So we need to unlearn that. Class is, when did I elevate when I could have escalated today? Elevate means trying to succeed in a situation. Escalate means trying to win. One of the things we discovered is our desire to win destroys more opportunities for success. And then it's not the last question. It's the bottom question on the tower. It's the foundational question, which is self-respect as a value, which is a commitment to knowing that when you're empty, you have nothing left to give to other people. And the question is, what did I do today to be good to myself? So those 6 questions. But here's the important piece that you're getting like the 60 minutes in 2 minutes here. The important piece is this. You get up in the morning and you know the questions. Imagine if every day before you go to bed, you have to prove you deserve another day on earth, not at the end of like a quarter or a 5-year strategic plan or the end of your life. Every night before you go to bed, you have to prove that tomorrow I get to go back and do this life thing again. You have to get 3 questions out of 6 every day to earn another day. Just imagine if that was our reality. If that was, in fact, the reality, the questions would be non-negotiable, right? Imagine if every day before you went to bed, you had to answer 3 out of 6 questions in order to wake up again the next day, but you're given the questions in the morning. Like, you would make damn sure you answer those questions, but you don't have to ace them. You don't have to get all 6, man. Nobody can get all 6 every day. You got to get 3 out of 6, got to pass the test. If that was the case, the questions would be non-negotiable. They would drive our behaviors. They would drive our decision-making. They would drive our priorities every day. And because each one is tied to a value that I truly care about and my company cares about, by setting up that structure, what we're trying to force out of ourselves is a recalibration of our priorities. We're trying to make it so that we prioritize our to-be list at the same level as our to-do list. And I'm not saying your to-be list isn't important, because I never get asked back to a company if I did. But what I am saying is that for most of us, most of our lives have been driven more by our to-do list than our to-be list. It's been a long time since we could look and say most of my decisions or priorities on any given day were driven more by who I wanted to be than the crap I had to get done. And I think that we should make commitments to one another. Your to-do list is important. We live in a social world. We have a social contract, right? That we got to make obligations to each other personally and professionally. We got to live up to them. But like, I don't know, if every obligation you have in a given day is an obligation to somebody else, then you're just living a life of obligation. Like, how many of you listening out there, if you really look at the obligations you've created for yourself on a look at every obligation you're going to have next week. Are any of them obligations to yourself? And we could argue that picking up the kids is an obligation to yourself because you want to be a good parent. But that's an obligation to your children. And there's nothing wrong with that. I am saying if 100% of your obligations in a given day are obligations to other people, you're living a life of obligation. That is a source of incredible stress. That's so frustrating. That's so alienating. Make 10% of your obligations to yourself. The leadership test to me represents 10% of my daily obligations to get 3 out of those 6 questions. And if I'm successful in doing that, I have made sure that I've actually lived my to-be list. But like that is a big piece for me, is I have to be able at the end of the day to say, here are the moments where I was the person that I claim to be. And if you create 10% of your obligations to yourself, it leaves 90% to the rest of the world. And that's a life of service. And I don't have to tell you that a life of service is different. A life of service is empowering, and a life of service is sustainable. Like a life of obligation is not sustainable. That 100% of your obligations to other people, even if you love them more than anything else in the world, will eventually make you feel as if you're living a life of obligation. And nobody is energized for a life of obligation. Like the leadership test, those questions and the psychology behind them, that is how I say these are my obligations to me. Because like, let's face it, like one of the crappy things about life is that we're not always in charge of what we get to do every day, but we're always in charge of who we are. Read Man's Search for Meaning. There's no better encapsulation of that truth in humans, that people can take from you what you do. They can control what you do. They can limit what you do, but they can never fully take away who we are. Only we do that because we forget that we have it and we don't give ourselves evidence of that. But if you get 3 out of 6 of those leadership test questions every day, that means that no matter what in your life that was outside of your control blew up in your face, at least you controlled these 3 things. And at the end of the day, you can say everything outside of my control exploded on me. But in these 3 moments, I was the man or the woman or the person that I want to be. I know a lot of you listening, some days that's all you get. It doesn't make a bad day into a good day. Like, I'm not going to blow that smoke up your butt. It's not like you go home and your cat died and your best friend passed away, like, and that you got fired, and that you can be like, but you lived these 3 values. Like, the day's a success. It is not. That day sucked. But if at the end of the day you could say, but in these 3 moments, I was the woman I wanted to be, then it wasn't a waste. And I think that right now, when everything blows up in our face, we look at the day as a waste. And if you string enough wasted days together, you feel as if you don't matter. And the feeling that we don't matter is an extraordinarily dangerous phenomenon.
Can we take a break and come back and talk about that? Because that is one of my favorite topics that you speak about, Drew, is this question of why we matter.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk more about it because over the last few months, I've come to realize there are some things I need to consider when I ask it, and I haven't been considering it enough.
Okay, great. And, I think it comes into, we've all been through a lot in the pandemic. I'm sure that that's informed some of your view, and you and I haven't talked about that in a long time. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about why we matter. And also, I want you to share this fabulous little exercise that I caught you mentioning in another interview, your GOAT, greatest of all time exercise that you do with your phone. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue with Drew Dudley.